The microspending trap. There is something happening in the wallets and bank accounts of millions of people right now. Something so invisible and so completely normalized as part of everyday life that almost nobody recognizes it happening. Money is disappearing, not from big dramatic financial mistakes or poor life choices, but from tiny purchases made without thought, without deliberation, without any real awareness that they're even happening. This is the problem facing someone who spends $3,381 annually on impulse purchases they cannot recall making, on coffee visits forgotten by lunchtime, on delivery orders placed out of stress or convenience, on subscriptions that renew automatically while remaining unwatched. The average person thinks the problem is that they don't earn enough money. They wake up every morning convinced that if they just made an additional $500 monthly, or perhaps $1,000, everything would fix itself. They would finally have a cushion, finally feel secure, finally be able to stop worrying. But this belief is incomplete and ultimately misleading, because earning more money while spending unconsciously is like trying to fill a bathtub while the drain remains wide open. The water keeps disappearing no matter how much is added. Think about the previous week. How many purchases happened that are now completely forgotten? A coffee that cost $5 and was consumed without thought. A food delivery order placed without planning. A streaming subscription that renews automatically alongside 5 other subscriptions that are not currently being watched. An impulse buy that felt like nothing in the moment because it was cheap enough to bypass the brain's decision-making process entirely. Now multiply that by 52 weeks, then by 10 years, then by 30 years. That number is someone's retirement, someone's freedom, someone's future entirely spent on things they cannot remember enjoying. Over 85% of impulse purchases are triggered not by actual need, but by discounts and sales and limited time offers. Which means that most people are not spending money because they want something. They are spending money because they feel like they are getting a good deal. The psychological difference is profound. The effect is devastating. Because when someone buys something cheap, their brain does not activate the same decision-making processes that activate when they consider buying something expensive. A $2,000 laptop triggers careful thinking, research, deliberation with others, a genuine cost-benefit analysis. A $5 coffee triggers nothing. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that makes careful, conscious decisions, goes offline, and the person operates on pure impulse and habit instead. Here is what most people never realize. They actually lose more money on cheap purchases than on expensive ones, because they never think about cheap purchases. They cannot escape them. They are everywhere, all the time, every single day, arriving through notifications and deals and the subtle social pressure of seeing others making the same purchases. 10 impulses per month on average means over 120 impulses per year, which translates to approximately 1 impulse every 3 days for every adult in America. This is not a personal failure or a character weakness. This is human neurology combined with sophisticated marketing and modern technology, all working together against natural decision-making. The human brain evolved in a world where every purchase was significant and meaningful. Now corporations have engineered an entire system designed to exploit exactly how the brain makes decisions about small amounts of money. But there is something important to understand here. The moment someone recognizes how the trap works, the recognition itself begins the escape. Awareness cannot be unseen. Knowledge cannot be unknown. And that is where real change begins to happen. This audiobook explores stories of real people. Jennifer, 42 years old, a marketing manager in Seattle, who spent over $1,300 annually on coffee she never remembered drinking. Marcus, 51, whose food delivery orders added up to $1,800 every single year when he finally stopped to calculate them. Sarah, 38, who discovered that her forgotten streaming subscriptions were costing her $480 annually, and that single discovery shifted her entire relationship with money. These are not wealthy people or poor people. They are normal people doing normal things, caught in a system designed specifically to trap normal people. By the end of this audiobook, someone will understand not just where their money is going, but why it is going there. They will understand the psychology behind it, the system designed to perpetuate it, and most importantly, they will have a practical action plan for starting to escape that trap, starting today, not tomorrow. The trap is real and sophisticated, but the escape is simpler than most people realize. Chapter 1. The Invisible Drain. Why cheap purchases cost more than expensive ones. The human brain has evolved a fascinating and powerful defense mechanism when it comes to spending money, one that served our ancestors well for thousands of years, in a world where every purchase held genuine significance and real consequence. When someone considers buying something expensive, a $2,000 laptop, for instance, the entire decision-making apparatus activates with intensity and precision. The rational mind engages fully. Research happens. Comparisons occur across multiple retailers. Reviews are read carefully. Conversations take place with trusted advisors about whether the purchase truly makes sense. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for careful deliberation and long-term thinking, lights up like a security system detecting an intrusion, sending wave after wave of warning signals throughout the mind. This is significant. This requires real thought. This deserves careful consideration. But somewhere in the relatively recent evolution of modern consumer culture, a fundamental and exploitable vulnerability in this neural defense system was discovered, studied, and systematically weaponized by corporations, retailers, subscription services, and applications designed specifically to profit from this weakness. When something is cheap, something profoundly different happens inside the brain. The decision-making process does not activate. The warning system remains silent. $5 for a coffee before work feels like nothing, barely a blip on the financial radar screen. $10 for a food delivery fee barely registers as a transaction at all. $12 for a streaming subscription that will quietly renew itself every month without drawing attention seems so trivial, so insignificant, that the rational mind never bothers to question whether it serves any real purpose. The moment someone sees a low price attached to something they want, the rational apparatus goes quiet, goes offline, goes into a kind of hibernation where it no longer performs its primary function of protecting financial resources. There is no alarm that sounds, no warning system that activates, no deliberation that occurs. The purchase happens almost automatically, like breathing, like blinking, like any other unconscious habit the body performs throughout the day without requiring any meaningful mental energy or real attention or conscious decision-making. This is not a personal weakness and certainly not a character flaw or moral failing of any kind. This is human neurology. Specifically the way the brain has evolved to process financial decisions based on magnitude and perceived importance. Meeting modern marketing psychology and technology. And the collision between these forces has created something that is devastating in its effectiveness at separating people from their money while leaving them completely unaware that the separation is even happening. For this reason, someone might go months or even years wondering why they never seem to have enough money, why they feel perpetually broke despite earning what should be a comfortable income. why they cannot seem to build savings or achieve financial stability, no matter how much they earn or how carefully they think they are managing their money. Consider the mathematics of invisibility and the power it holds over financial reality. The average American spends $281.75 every single month on impulse purchases, on things they cannot recall buying later, on purchases made without forethought or planning or real intention. This translates into an annual figure of $3,381 per year spent on things someone does not even remember acquiring. Now expand this mathematics across the arc of an entire working life. Someone who works from age 25 until age 65 has exactly 40 years of earning potential and 40 years of opportunity to make financial choices that will either build toward their future or chip away at it. 40 years multiplied by $3,381 equals $135,240. And this represents money lost entirely to purchases, made without conscious thought or real deliberation. But here is where the mathematics becomes truly devastating, and where the long-term consequences become impossible to ignore. If someone took that same $3,381 every single year and invested it at an average 7% annual return, which is a conservative number for a diversified investment portfolio and well within reach for most people. After 40 years, that money would grow to approximately $552,000 through the power of compound growth. $552,000. That is not accumulated through earning more money or through any special investment skill or through taking extraordinary risks. That is accumulated simply through the act of not spending money on things they were never consciously choosing to purchase anyway, and then allowing that money to grow quietly in the background through time and the power of compounding. Jennifer, 42 years old, works as a project manager at a mid-sized technology company in Seattle. And by all measures, she is financially responsible in the ways that most people consider important. She deliberates seriously over major purchases. She compares prices on significant items before deciding. She never makes large financial decisions impulsively or without real thought about whether they align with her values and goals. She keeps a budget of sorts, though she admits it is more of a rough guideline than anything precisely tracked. When it comes to big-ticket items, she is careful and thoughtful and deliberate. But somewhere along the line, something fascinating happened. She never once counted her daily coffee stops, never tracked the money flowing out of her account for these small, seemingly inconsequential purchases, never added them up to see what the real total might be by the end of a year. $5 every single weekday at a local coffee shop or cafe, sometimes $7 when she treats herself to something slightly fancier or adds a pastry to the order. The moment she makes the purchase, her brain dismisses it as insignificant. 5 seconds later, it has been completely and entirely forgotten. She goes through the day having no real memory that she even bought coffee that morning. Over the course of a single year, those forgotten purchases add up to $1,300. Over 5 years, that becomes $6,500. Over 30 years, the remaining span until her planned retirement, that same coffee habit, if it continues unchanged and she makes no adjustments to this pattern, becomes $48,000 spent on something she cannot actually remember enjoying or tasting or even drinking at all. And if that money had been invested instead of spent, at 7% annual returns, that coffee habit alone would become approximately $215,000 by retirement. And here is what makes the microspending trap so particularly effective and so extremely difficult for most people to escape. Jennifer does not feel like she is overspending on coffee. $5 does not trigger the part of her brain that knows how to say no, how to decline, how to walk away from a purchase. $5 does not trigger the same neural alarm system that would activate if someone tried to convince her to buy a used car she did not need, or a piece of furniture she could not afford. The coffee purchase feels harmless because it is small, almost negligible, so minor that questioning it seems like overthinking. The invisibility of the small purchase is precisely what makes it so financially expensive over time. Because invisibility breeds automatic behavior, and automatic behavior becomes habit, and habit becomes the path of least resistance that the brain follows without ever needing to examine it or reconsider it. The research on impulse buying and how the brain processes purchasing decisions is remarkably clear on the mechanisms involved. When a price is presented to a consumer as a discount or a special deal, impulsive buying increases significantly compared to neutral price presentations where no discount is mentioned. When something is framed as a limited time offer or positioned as a rare opportunity that might not come around again, the decision-making brain becomes noticeably less active and engaged, while the impulse-driven, reactive brain becomes more active and more dominant. When notifications arrive on a phone or through an app, promising discounts or claiming limited availability or suggesting that someone is missing out on a good opportunity, these notifications activate the same brain regions that are associated with fear and urgency and anxiety, making thoughtful deliberation and careful consideration nearly impossible in that particular moment when the person is making the decision. 85% of all impulse purchases across America are triggered specifically by some kind of discount, promotion, sale, or limited time offer, which means that most people are fundamentally not spending money because they want something or because they have thought carefully about whether they need it. They are spending money because they have been psychologically conditioned to feel like they are getting a good deal, like they are saving money, like they would be foolish to pass up the opportunity. Marcus, 51 years old, runs a small but successful accounting firm where he has built a reputation for meticulous attention to detail with numbers and for helping his clients understand their financial situations with clarity and precision. When he finally sat down one evening with all of his credit card statements spread out in front of him and began methodically adding up everything he had spent on food delivery services over the previous 12 months, the numbers shocked him so completely that he initially wondered if he had made a calculation error. $1,800. Not a mistake. Not a typo. $1,800 spent on food ordered through delivery applications. Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub, and various restaurant apps. Money that had simply and quietly disappeared into a category he had never bothered to track closely because each individual purchase seemed so minor and inconsequential. $30 here, $40 there, maybe $25 for breakfast delivered on a Sunday morning when he did not feel like going out. None of these transactions felt particularly significant in the moment because the price attached to each one was low enough to completely bypass his normal decision-making process. But when he added up an entire year of these transactions, when all of those invisible purchases were finally made visible by the stark arithmetic of addition, he realized with a certain kind of shock that he had spent the equivalent of a decent used car on food he had ordered impulsively, eaten quickly, and largely forgotten about within hours of receiving it. The delivery applications had engineered the entire experience brilliantly and deliberately to make purchasing as effortless as possible and thinking as unnecessary as possible. One click on the phone. Payment already saved on file from previous orders. Food arriving within minutes. The entire transaction from desire to fulfillment takes place in a compressed time frame, designed to avoid giving the rational mind any opportunity to step in and ask whether this purchase actually makes real sense or serves any genuine need. And perhaps the most insidious and dangerous part of the microspending trap is that every single time someone makes a cheap impulse purchase without real deliberation or thought, they are literally strengthening the neural pathways in their brain that make future impulse purchases more likely. The brain learns through repetition and reinforcement. The brain learns that purchases under a certain price threshold do not require thought or consideration. The brain learns that notifications and deals and discounts and limited time offers trigger buying decisions. The brain learns that every moment of boredom or stress or loneliness or emptiness can be solved with a small purchase. And because the purchase is cheap, because it is small, there is no guilt afterward, no judgment, no immediate consequences that would teach the brain to behave differently. Except there are consequences. They simply are not immediate, and they are not visible in the moment, which is exactly what makes them so dangerous and so difficult to recognize until years have passed. And someone looks up from their financial life with a sense of confusion and frustration. Compare this neural activation to how the brain handles expensive purchases, and the contrast becomes striking and undeniable. Someone considering buying a $2,000 laptop spends weeks in deliberation. They research different brands and models. They read reviews from other users. They compare prices across multiple retailers to find the best value. They consider whether they actually need an upgrade or whether the device they currently have is still serving them well. They think about opportunity costs. What else could that $2,000 do if invested differently? What else could it purchase? What they would be giving up by making this one purchase? The entire process of careful consideration and deliberation is automatic and instinctive precisely because the purchase is large enough to trigger the brain's ancient defense systems. But someone buying a $2 coffee every single weekday for a year, spending $650 total on coffee they do not actually remember enjoying or even fully tasting, does not spend even 5 minutes in real deliberation about the purchase. There is no research involved. There is no comparison of options. There is no real consideration of whether the purchase makes sense. There is only the automatic, habitual act of purchasing, and then forgetting, purchasing, and then forgetting, day after day after day, week after week after week, month after month after month. Here is what someone who has never looked closely at their own spending patterns might not understand about the microspending trap. Losing more money on cheap purchases than on expensive ones is not a paradox or a contradiction or something unexpected. It is inevitable and predictable, and actually quite logical when examined carefully. Because people think carefully about expensive purchases, they sometimes decide not to make them. They catch themselves in the middle of deliberation and realize they do not actually need something they were considering buying. They change their minds. They choose to wait. This mental friction, this opportunity for deliberation and reconsideration and second-guessing, actually prevents at least some expensive purchases from happening in the first place. But with cheap purchases, with the small transactions that slip through without triggering the decision-making brain, this protective friction simply does not exist. The mental friction has been deliberately removed by design. The opportunity for deliberation has been engineered away. Someone making 10 impulse buys every single month, and research shows the average American does exactly this. Purchasing things under a certain price threshold without ever really thinking about whether they actually need them or whether they make sense will eventually spend far more money in total than someone who carefully considers every expensive purchase they make and sometimes decides to skip it entirely. The microspending trap is designed this way on purpose, deliberately and strategically. Corporations, retailers, subscription services, and digital applications have invested billions of dollars in research designed to figure out exactly how the human brain makes decisions about small amounts of money, how to exploit that decision-making process, and how to profit from that exploitation. They have hired psychologists and behavioral economists and neuroscientists to study the problem. They have conducted thousands of experiments. They have A/B tested different approaches to see which ones work most effectively. And they have succeeded spectacularly at their mission. But here is something critical and important to understand. The moment someone recognizes how the trap actually works, the moment they see the mechanism clearly instead of remaining unconscious of it, they are already beginning to escape it. Awareness cannot be unseen. Knowledge cannot be unknown. Once someone truly knows that cheap purchases are specifically designed to bypass their decision-making system, that they are engineered to trigger automatic behavior instead of conscious choice, then they have the power to start making different choices, to start breaking the pattern, to start reclaiming control over their own financial life. The first step toward escape is always visibility, always awareness, always understanding exactly where the money is actually going and why. Your action for today: track every single purchase made today that costs less than $20. Do not judge. Do not try to change behavior yet. Do not add explanations or justifications. Simply write it down or note it in a phone. The coffee, the snack, the app purchase, the convenience item, the impulse buy, the subscription renewal, everything under $20. By the end of the day, there will be a number, and that number will reveal something powerful. The true cost of invisible spending, the money that disappears without awareness, the purchases that happen without conscious deliberation. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Cheap. How your brain gets hacked by low prices. Behavioral economics has spent decades uncovering and documenting something fascinating and deeply troubling about how the human mind processes information about price and value. Something that goes far beyond simple mathematics or rational comparison of costs and benefits. The discovery is both elegant and devastating in its implications. When something is presented to someone as cheap, when the price is perceived as low or insignificant, the entire decision-making apparatus in the brain does not simply become less active. It fundamentally transforms how it processes the information available. The rational, careful, deliberative part of the brain does not merely take a step back or reduce its involvement. Instead, it essentially hands over control to a completely different system, one that operates on impulse, on immediate gratification, on the primitive desire to seize an opportunity before it disappears. This neurological handoff happens so quickly and so automatically that most people have no conscious awareness it is even occurring. Researchers studying this phenomenon have discovered something remarkable. The relationship between price and impulse buying is not straightforward or linear in the way most people might intuitively expect. When a price is presented to a consumer in a particular way, expressed as an absolute discount amount, for example, save $5 rather than save 20%. Impulse buying increases significantly compared to situations where the exact same discount is presented using percentage terminology. This might seem like a small semantic difference, a minor variation in how information is communicated. But the impact on actual purchasing behavior is profound and measurable. The brain processes $5 differently than it processes 20%. One triggers a sense of concrete gain, of actual money saved, of a tangible benefit that can be immediately grasped. The other requires mathematical computation and abstract thinking. One activates the emotional centers of the brain responsible for joy and satisfaction at getting a deal. The other requires the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for careful calculation, to remain engaged and active. For someone experiencing cognitive depletion, someone who has been making decisions all day, someone who is tired or stressed or emotionally drained, the concrete, emotional language of $5 wins the battle over the abstract language of percentages every single time. The concept that behavioral economists call anticipated regret plays a major role in driving impulse purchases, particularly impulse purchases, in response to discounts and limited time offers. Anticipated regret is the fear and anxiety someone feels when imagining a future scenario where they did not take an action they could have taken, where they missed an opportunity that will never come around again. Someone sees a flash sale promotion promising a discount on something they might someday want. Instantly, their brain begins running a simulation. What if I do not buy this now? What if the sale ends and this price is never available again? What if I regret missing this opportunity? This fear of future regret is often more powerful than any rational consideration of whether the product is actually needed or whether it actually provides value. The brain is literally choosing to avoid the imagined pain of regret over the concrete reality of whether a purchase makes sense. This is why flash sales work so effectively, why limited time offers drive such powerful impulse purchases, why scarcity triggers urgent action. The mechanism is not rational. It is deeply emotional and deeply ancient, rooted in the same survival instincts that guided our ancestors when resources were actually limited and genuinely rare. There is a psychological principle called diminishing sensitivity that plays a crucial role in how people perceive the cumulative cost of small purchases. Consider someone who is deciding whether to purchase a large item, such as a new computer system worth $2,000, along with several smaller accessories and upgrades. They might decide to add a $30 mouse, a $50 monitor stand, and a $20 carrying case. Because their mind is anchored to the large purchase price of $2,000, these additional small purchases feel trivial, almost free, as though adding them to the larger purchase barely increases the total cost at all. The brain is comparing every small expense to the baseline of the large expense, making the small things seem inconsequential by comparison. But if someone were to present the same person with the opportunity to purchase just the mouse, just the monitor stand, and just the carrying case without the computer, $100 of accessories for $100, they would likely deliberate seriously about whether these items are worth the money. The exact same purchases feel different depending on what anchor price the mind is using as a reference point. This is why retail stores bundle products together, why expensive items are sold alongside cheaper items, why the real goal is often to get someone into the mindset of spending on a large item and then quietly adding smaller items to the cart when someone is cognitively depleted, when their mental resources have been depleted through making decisions all day long, through stress, through emotional challenges, through lack of sleep or poor nutrition. They become dramatically more susceptible to making cheap impulse purchases. The brain's executive function, the system responsible for careful decision-making and impulse control, literally runs on energy and glucose and neurochemical resources. When these resources are depleted, the higher-order functions shut down first, leaving the more primitive impulse systems in charge. Research from 2024 shows that 54% of shoppers have spent $100 or more on a single impulse purchase, and 20% have spent $1,000 or more on an impulse buy. But here is the critical detail. Most of these large impulse purchases do not happen when people are well-rested and feeling mentally sharp. They happen when people are tired, stressed, emotionally vulnerable, or cognitively depleted. This is why midnight shopping scrolling is so dangerous. Why browsing apps late at night leads to purchases people regret the next morning. Why stress and emotional difficulty are such powerful triggers for impulse spending. The way prices are presented to consumers is not accidental or arbitrary. Every element has been deliberately designed through countless A/B tests and psychological studies to make purchasing as easy and as mindless as possible. One-click purchasing removes friction from the buying process. When friction is removed, when there is no pause or hesitation or moment where someone has to complete multiple steps to finalize a purchase, the automatic systems of the brain remain in control, and the conscious, deliberative systems never get a chance to intervene. Subscription models with automatic renewals operate on a brilliant psychological principle. The person makes one conscious decision to subscribe, which feels fine and reasonable and low cost. But then the renewal happens automatically, without any decision-making required. By the time someone realizes they are being charged, often months or even years have passed, and the charge has become almost invisible in the context of all their other expenses. Social proof plays a powerful role as well. When someone sees that millions of other people have purchased something, or when they see that their friends or family members have purchased something, the brain interprets this as validation that the purchase makes sense, that they should not be left out, that this is something normal people do. The fear of missing out combines with social proof to create a powerful psychological cocktail that drives impulse purchases. Sarah, 38 years old, works as a human resources director at a healthcare company and considers herself someone who is generally good with money, who does not overspend, who avoids unnecessary purchases. But when she finally took a moment to carefully review her subscription services, streaming services, fitness apps, meditation apps, productivity apps, language learning services, specialized software, meal planning services, she discovered something that shocked her. She was paying $480 every single month, and she was actively using perhaps 3 or 4 of these services regularly. The rest were simply renewing automatically, month after month after month, charging her money for services she had forgotten she even had. Some had been renewing for over 2 years, which meant she had spent thousands of dollars on services she was not using and often did not even remember subscribing to. When she examined how she had come to subscribe to these services in the first place, the pattern became clear. She had seen an advertisement or received an email offering a free trial. The trial period felt fine because it was free. At the end of the trial period, the service transitioned automatically to a paid subscription without requiring her to actively confirm that she wanted to continue. By the time she noticed the charge weeks or even months later, the amount seemed small enough and the charge was buried enough in her other expenses that she simply forgot about it or convinced herself she would cancel it sometime soon. But sometime soon never arrived. The automatic renewals continued. The money kept disappearing. The trap worked perfectly because it required almost no active decision-making from Sarah's side. She had made one decision to try something, and then passive inaction meant she was automatically committed to paying for it indefinitely. The phenomenon researchers call mental accounting describes the way the human mind categorizes spending into different psychological buckets, each with its own set of rules and guidelines for what feels acceptable. Someone might feel terrible about spending $40 on something they do not really need. But if that $40 comes from their entertainment budget for the month or from a bonus they received, it suddenly feels acceptable. Or if the $40 is spread across the multiple small purchases, $10 here, $8 there, $7 somewhere else, the pain of spending is distributed across time and does not accumulate in the mind, in the same way as a single $40 purchase would. This mental accounting system protects the ego and prevents the conscious recognition of problematic spending patterns. The brain literally recategorizes spending in ways that reduce emotional discomfort and guilt. This is why someone can spend over $1,000 on fast food in a year and not feel horrified by it, even though if presented with the total all at once, they would be shocked. The spending happened one transaction at a time. in small enough chunks that the mental accounting system processed each one as insignificant. There is also a principle of behavioral economics called choice architecture, which describes how the way options are presented to someone fundamentally influences which options they end up choosing. When a retailer displays cheaper items right next to more expensive versions of the same product, the cheaper item feels like the rational choice, the smart choice. When an app presents a free option alongside premium options that cost money, the premium option suddenly seems more valuable and more worth paying for than it actually is. When a notification arrives on someone's phone with a special offer expiring in 2 hours, the time pressure creates urgency that short-circuits careful deliberation. None of these manipulations are subtle or hidden. They are deliberate architectural choices designed to influence decisions in predictable ways. And perhaps most importantly, when someone repeatedly makes small purchases without deliberating, $5 here, $12 there, $8 somewhere else, they are training their brain to make purchasing decisions more automatically and with less consideration. The neural pathways in the brain that connect desire to purchase are being strengthened through repeated use. The brain is literally learning that when it sees something it wants and the price is low, the appropriate response is to buy it immediately without thinking. This learned response becomes automatic. It becomes habitual. It becomes the default pathway that the brain follows whenever the conditions present themselves, which means that breaking the cycle requires not just one conscious decision to stop impulsive spending, but rather a sustained effort to retrain the brain, to strengthen different neural pathways, to make the deliberative brain dominant once again over the impulse-driven brain. The system of microspending is not accidental. It is not the result of consumer choice freely exercised in a neutral marketplace. It is the deliberate product of careful psychological engineering designed to exploit how the human brain actually works, not how economists assume it works in their theoretical models. Someone who wants to escape this trap needs to understand that they are not fighting against their own weakness or their own poor decision-making. They are fighting against decades of research and billions of dollars of investment designed specifically to hack their neurological systems and override their conscious choice. Your action for today: review one app or service that charges you monthly. Look at when you first subscribed. Ask yourself honestly, do I actively use this service? If the answer is no, cancel it today. Do not wait. Do not think about it later. Cancel it right now while you are reading this and while this chapter is fresh in your mind. Notice how you feel when you cancel. Notice what thoughts arise. This is valuable information about how psychologically resistant you have become to letting go of subscriptions, even subscriptions you do not use. Chapter 3. The Fake Need Factory. How deals create desires you didn't have. There is a factory running 24 hours a day in the digital ecosystem, where desires are manufactured and then sold back to people, as if those desires emerged naturally from within themselves, as if someone woke up genuinely wanting something, when in reality they had no interest in it whatsoever until an algorithm, a notification, a targeted advertisement, or a flash sale announcement arrived on their screen and suddenly created the desire from nothing. This is not how desires worked for most of human history. For thousands of years, desires were organic. Someone wanted something because they needed it, or because they had genuinely come to value it through experience or through conversation with others they trusted. But in the modern economy, particularly in the digital consumer ecosystem, desires are manufactured with precision, tested for effectiveness through A/B testing, refined through psychological research, and then deployed at exactly the moment when someone is most vulnerable to responding to them. The psychological mechanism behind this manufactured desire is something researchers call scarcity mindset. and it is one of the most powerful motivators of human behavior in consumer contexts. When someone encounters a notification saying, "Only 3 left in stock," or a countdown timer showing, "This offer expires in 2 hours," or a banner announcing, "Everyone else is buying this right now," the brain instantly enters a state of psychological urgency. This urgency is not based on actual scarcity of resources or genuine need. It is artificial scarcity, manufactured scarcity, or deliberately created by technology and marketing to trigger the same ancient survival instincts that would have been useful in a world where resources were genuinely limited, but that are counterproductive and financially damaging in a world of digital abundance. The brain cannot distinguish between real scarcity and artificial scarcity. It responds the same way to both. The amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear and urgency, activates. Blood pressure rises slightly. The primitive, survival-oriented parts of the brain take over. The rational, deliberative parts go quiet. And suddenly, the person makes a purchase they would never have made if given time to think. This manufactured urgency is particularly insidious because it exploits something that behavioral economists call loss aversion, which describes the psychological reality that humans feel the pain of loss approximately twice as intensely as they feel the pleasure of gain. Someone might feel neutral about the prospect of gaining $20, but they would feel considerable anxiety about the prospect of losing $20 they already thought they had. Retailers and marketers understand this principle deeply. When they frame an offer as a limited-time discount, they are not really offering a gain. They are framing it as an opportunity to avoid a loss. If you do not buy this now at this discount, you will lose the opportunity to get this price. The price will go back up. You will have missed out. This framing triggers loss aversion powerfully and drives immediate action. The person is not rationally evaluating whether the product is worth the discounted price. They are emotionally reacting to the fear of missing out on an opportunity, and that emotional reaction overrides the rational evaluation. David, 48 years old, works in construction and considers himself someone who does not really shop much, someone who does not care about deals or special offers or limited-time sales. But he discovered something about himself when he started really paying attention to how his phone notifications and email alerts were shaping his purchasing behavior. He would receive a notification from Amazon showing a deal on something he did not need, something he had not been looking for or thinking about. And yet the notification would create enough curiosity and enough perceived urgency that he would click it, browse it, and end up purchasing it. Over 6 months, he tracked the pattern and realized he had spent over $900 on items purchased through these notifications, items that were still in bags or boxes in his home, unopened or barely used. Every single purchase had followed the same pattern. Notification arrives, artificial urgency is created through scarcity language or time-limited offers. His brain enters into a reactive state, and the purchase happens. Then, after the purchase, after the dopamine hit from buying something wore off, he would feel confused about why he had bought it at all. The item would sit unused while his money had moved to a retailer, and then to a supplier, and then to a factory somewhere else in the world. His $900 bought him not joy or utility or value, but regret and confusion, and the nagging sense that his money had disappeared for no good reason. Consider how notifications function in the modern digital ecosystem. A notification is not a neutral piece of information. A notification is a carefully engineered interrupt, designed and tested to break through whatever someone is currently doing and demand their attention right now. Research shows that the average notification takes 0.3 seconds to grab someone's attention and influence their behavior. In 0.3 seconds, before the conscious, rational mind has time to properly engage, the interrupt has already achieved its purpose. The phone buzzes, the attention shifts, and if the notification is timed correctly, if it arrives when someone is in the right psychological state, bored, stressed, scrolling mindlessly before bed, the pathway from notification to purchase can be triggered almost automatically. The notification does not present objective information. It presents framing designed to trigger response. Limited time offer. Just for you. Only 3 left. Your friends are buying this. Don't miss out. Each piece of language is chosen specifically because it has been tested and proven to increase purchasing likelihood. The concept of artificial scarcity is absolutely central to understanding how the fake need factory operates. Real scarcity means there genuinely is not enough of something to meet demand. Artificial scarcity means retailers have deliberately limited the quantity available or artificially limited the time the offer is available, even though the product could be made available in any quantity for any duration. But the brain cannot tell the difference between these 2 types of scarcity. The fear response is the same. A product that a retailer could produce in unlimited quantities for unlimited time suddenly becomes limited edition, or exclusive, or available only through Friday at midnight. And immediately that product becomes more desirable, more urgent, more worth purchasing. This is why fast fashion retailers create new inventory constantly and get rid of old inventory quickly, rotating products to create the appearance of scarcity and exclusivity, even though they could keep anything in stock indefinitely. This is why luxury brands deliberately produce fewer items than could sell, keeping prices artificially high and demand artificially high through artificial scarcity. The phenomenon that behavioral economists call FOMO, fear of missing out, is perhaps the most powerful emotional driver of impulse purchasing in the modern era, and it is deliberately cultivated and weaponized by retailers and social media platforms. When someone sees that their friends or peers or people they admire are buying something, when they see it on social media or hear about it in conversation, the brain begins running a simulation. Everyone else has this. I don't have it. I am being left out. I am different. I am missing something important. FOMO is not actually about the product. It is about belonging, about fitting in, about not being left behind while the rest of the world moves on. Retailers exploit this perfectly by creating trending products, by showing purchase counts or popularity indicators, by creating influencer endorsements and making products what everyone is talking about. The original desire for the product was not present until the FOMO was triggered, but now the desire feels authentic and urgent and personal. Melanie, 39 years old, realized she had become susceptible to FOMO when she caught herself purchasing something specifically because she saw multiple posts about it on social media on the same day. She had not been looking for the product. She did not need it. But when she saw 3 different people she followed posting about it, her brain interpreted this as a signal that it was important, that it was worth having, that she was missing out by not having it. She purchased it immediately. It arrived. She tried it once. It has sat unused in her home for over a year. The purchase cost her $55, but the real cost was the reminder that her purchasing decisions are susceptible to social influence and artificial urgency in ways she had not fully appreciated before. The integration of artificial scarcity and FOMO with targeted advertising creates a psychological trap that is extraordinarily difficult to resist. Someone scrolls through social media. An advertisement appears that has been targeted specifically to them based on their browsing history, their purchase history, their demographics, and their psychological profile as determined by data analysis. The advertisement shows a product that is framed as trending, as exclusive, as limited, as what everyone is buying. The advertisement includes urgency language. The price is framed as a deal or a discount. All of these elements are combined together strategically. The person clicks the advertisement almost without conscious awareness they are doing it. They land on a checkout page that has been optimized for conversion, that makes purchasing as easy as possible and alternative actions, like going back or taking time to think, as difficult as possible. If they have a payment method saved, they can purchase with a single click. Before their conscious mind has time to intervene and ask whether this makes sense, the purchase is complete. The notification confirms the order. The dopamine hits the brain, and immediately, the regret begins to creep in. The key insight here is that none of these manufactured desires would exist without the external triggers. The notifications, the advertisements, the scarcity claims, the social proof, the targeted marketing. The person was living a perfectly complete life before the notification arrived. They had no sense of lacking anything. But in 0.3 seconds, their internal state shifted from contentment to desire. In 2 minutes, they had purchased something. In 2 hours, they had regretted it. The fake need factory does not make money by creating products that solve real problems. It makes money by creating problems, or more precisely, by creating the perception of problems, and then selling solutions to those problems that people would never have sought out on their own. And perhaps most importantly, this system is specifically designed to be resistant to conscious awareness and deliberately chosen resistance. Someone who is aware that they are being manipulated might try to resist. Someone who sees the notification and consciously reminds themselves that this is artificial scarcity and not a real deal might choose not to buy. But the system is designed to make this awareness difficult. The notifications arrive constantly, and each one brings a new manufactured desire. The social media feed shows an endless stream of products being purchased by others. The advertisements are personalized and targeted based on data about what will be most psychologically effective for that specific individual. The friction of resistance requires mental energy and conscious attention, while the friction of purchasing has been deliberately minimized. Your action for today. When a notification arrives on your phone today, whether it is an advertisement, a deal notification, a social media alert, or anything else, pause before responding. Do not click it immediately. Ask yourself, did I want this before the notification arrived? Have I been looking for this? Is this a real need or a manufactured desire? Write down your answer. Then wait 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, check whether you still want to purchase. Odds are very high that the urgency will have faded, that the artificial scarcity will no longer feel pressing, and that the desire will have largely disappeared as if it was never there at all. Chapter 4. The trap is real. Specific numbers that will shock you. The mathematics of microspending is not abstract or theoretical. It is concrete and measurable and undeniable when someone actually takes the time to sit down with their financial statements and track exactly where their money is disappearing. The numbers are not small, and they are not insignificant, and they do not accumulate slowly over time in a way that someone might rationalize or minimize. They accumulate quickly, dramatically, in ways that become shocking and impossible to ignore the moment someone actually looks at them directly. The reason most people do not see these numbers is not because the numbers are hidden or because they are deliberately obscured by anyone else. The reason most people do not see these numbers is because they have trained themselves not to look. Because the emotional discomfort of seeing is greater than the emotional discomfort of remaining ignorant. And because once someone sees these numbers, they can no longer pretend that small purchases do not matter. Begin with beverages, the category that has been studied most extensively because it is so universal, and because it reveals so clearly how invisible spending adds up. The average American spends $1,100 every single year on coffee shop purchases and cafe beverages. This is not an estimate. This is not a guess based on limited data. This is based on extensive tracking of actual consumer spending across millions of transactions. $1,100 annually means approximately $3 per day spent on beverage purchases made outside the home, which seems reasonable in isolation, which seems almost trivial when considered in a single transaction, but which becomes staggering when annualized. Someone who visits Starbucks or a similar coffee shop 5 days per week, spending an average of $5.50 per visit, will spend $1,430 per year on coffee. Over 40 years of work life, from age 25 to age 65. That is $57,200 spent on coffee. But if someone takes that $1,430 and invests it every single year at a 7% annual return, that money becomes approximately $591,000 through the power of compound growth by the time retirement arrives. Nearly $600,000 for coffee. Now consider food delivery services, which have become such a normalized part of American spending that many people do not even really think of them as spending anymore. They are just the way food happens to arrive. Americans spend $1,566 per year on food delivery services on average, with each order averaging approximately $35.42. This represents approximately 44 delivery orders per year, which breaks down to fewer than one per week on average. But the distribution is rarely even. Some weeks have multiple orders. Some weeks have none. The person typically orders delivery during moments of stress or fatigue, or when work is overwhelming, or when emotional energy is depleted. In other words, they order delivery precisely when they are least capable of thinking clearly about money and most vulnerable to the psychological trap of convenience. Over a working life of 40 years, $1,566 per year compounds to $642,000. Nearly 2/3 of $1 million spent on food that could have been prepared at home for a fraction of the cost. Food that was rushed through, barely tasted, often forgotten within hours of eating. 2/3 of $1 million for convenience in eating rather than for joy in eating or for the actual nutrition the food provided. Fast food represents another major category of microspending that sneaks up on people because individual purchases feel so minor. Millennials spend an average of $213.87 monthly on fast food specifically, not including food delivery or other restaurant spending. This totals approximately $2,566 per year. Compare this to baby boomers who spend approximately $59.43 monthly on fast food, or about $713 per year. The difference is striking. The younger generation is spending more than 3.5 times as much on fast food as the older generation. But for any generation, this spending adds up across a lifetime in ways that feel shocking when actually calculated. $2,566 per year for 25 years, a typical span from age 20 to age 45. Totals $64,150. $64,000 for burgers and fried chicken and drive-through meals eaten in cars on the way to somewhere else. Meals that provided temporary satiation but no lasting satisfaction. No memory worth keeping. No benefit that compounds in any meaningful way. But perhaps the most insidious category of microspending involves subscription services, because these purchases happen automatically and invisibly, because they renew without requiring any conscious decision-making, and because people often forget they even have them at all. The average American maintains 8 active subscriptions to various services, streaming services primarily, but also software subscriptions, app subscriptions, productivity tools, fitness apps, meditation services, and countless other categories. The average cost for these 8 subscriptions is $58 per month, or approximately $696 per year. But here is the truly shocking part. Research indicates that the average person actually uses only 2 or 3 of their 8 active subscriptions regularly. The other 5 or 6 subscriptions are essentially paying for access to services they are not using at all. This represents a cost of approximately $480 per year spent on services that provide zero value because they are never consumed. $480 per year on things that are completely wasted. $12,000 over a working lifetime on access to services that are never used, never experienced, never benefited from in any way. Consider the case of Thomas, 44 years old, who works as a software engineer and makes a solid 6-figure income, yet found himself unable to explain where a significant portion of his money disappeared to each month. When he finally sat down and inventoried his subscriptions and tracked his small purchases, he discovered a landscape of spending that shocked him despite his financial literacy and despite his understanding of mathematics. He subscribed to 3 different streaming services at $19, $14, and $17 per month respectively, $50 total. He subscribed to a fitness app he had not used in 6 months at $9.99 per month. He had a productivity software subscription at $14 per month. A language learning app he had tried once at $12.99 per month. A meditation app at $9.99 per month. Cloud storage he had never actually maximized at $10 per month. A meal planning service he had signed up for once and then abandoned at $8 per month. And countless others. The total was $123.97 per month, or approximately $1,488 per year, for services he could not even remember subscribing to in some cases and was certainly not using. When he canceled them all, he experienced a moment of genuine regret. Not about canceling the services, but about how long he had let this bleeding continue without stopping it. If he had canceled these subscriptions 5 years ago, he would have saved approximately $7,440. If he continues to use his newfound awareness to avoid similar subscriptions in the future, he will save over $1,488 every single year for the rest of his working life. That is money that could otherwise be disappearing without him even noticing it was gone. The picture becomes even more complete when these categories are combined. Someone who spends $1,300 annually on coffee and beverages, spends $1,566 annually on food delivery, spends $2,566 annually on fast food, spends $480 annually on forgotten subscriptions, spends an additional $1,000 on miscellaneous impulse purchases and other small expenses, totals approximately $7,912 per year spent on things that either provide minimal lasting value or no value at all, or are consumed so quickly and so unconsciously that they leave no memory or satisfaction behind. $7,912 per year. Over 40 years of working life, that is $315,680. But the real cost, the true cost, including the opportunity cost, the cost of not investing that money, is staggering. If that same $7,912 were invested every single year at a 7% average annual return, after 40 years, the compound value would reach approximately $2,054,000. $2 million. Someone could be $2 million wealthier simply by not spending money on things they do not even remember consuming or owning. This is not about deprivation. This is not about living poorly or experiencing less joy. This is about the mathematical reality that small spending on things of minimal value compounds across time into an enormous amount of lost future wealth. The reason these numbers are so shocking to most people is that microspending is literally designed to be invisible. Each individual transaction is so small that the conscious mind barely registers it. The brain dismisses it as insignificant. The emotion of the transaction, if there is any emotion at all, is usually positive and immediate. The brief pleasure of a new purchase, the quick satisfaction of food arriving, the small dopamine hit from getting a deal. The negative emotions, regret, guilt, financial anxiety, are delayed and diffused. By the time someone might feel regret about a small purchase, the credit card statement has been paid. The transaction is weeks in the past, and the emotional intensity has faded to almost nothing. The system works because it is specifically designed to separate the moment of pleasure from the moment of financial pain. But when someone takes the time to actually aggregate these numbers, to actually calculate what they represent across time, to actually look at the compound effect, something shifts in the mind. The illusion of insignificance collapses. The numbers become impossible to dismiss. The person can no longer pretend that small purchases do not matter, because the mathematics makes it undeniable that small purchases matter enormously. Your action for today: pull up your credit card statements from the last 3 months. Go through them and add up everything you spent under $20. Write down the total. Now multiply that number by 4 to get an annual estimate. Then multiply that number by 40. Write down that final number. Look at it. That is the raw amount of money that will disappear in your lifetime from small purchases alone if nothing changes. Now multiply that final number by 3.4. That is the amount that money would become if it had been invested at 7% annual returns. That is your potential future wealth sitting right there in that number. That is what is at stake. Chapter 5. Not deprivation. What you're actually cutting out. There is a fundamental misunderstanding that prevents most people from ever attempting to escape the microspending trap. And that misunderstanding is the belief that cutting out small purchases means living a life of deprivation, of self-denial, of constantly saying no to things they enjoy, of becoming the kind of person who refuses pleasure in the name of financial responsibility. This belief is not just discouraging, it is false. And the falseness of this belief is actually one of the most liberating insights someone can have when they decide to reduce their microspending and take control of their financial life. The truth is far more interesting and far more motivating than the fear of deprivation suggests. The truth is that most of the money someone is losing through microspending is not actually being spent on things they genuinely enjoy or that bring them real satisfaction. It is being spent on things they do not even remember, on purchases made without conscious awareness, on transactions that produce a brief moment of distraction or stimulation, followed by rapid and complete forgetting. Someone is not losing wealth by cutting out things they love. They are gaining wealth by eliminating things they were never consciously experiencing anyway. Consider what actually happens when someone tracks a week of their micro-spending with real attention and real honesty. How many of those $5 coffee purchases do they actually remember enjoying? When asked to describe in detail what the coffee tasted like, where they drank it, what they were thinking about, how they felt while consuming it, most people cannot answer these questions with any real specificity. The coffee is forgotten before it is even finished. The transaction happens. The payment is processed. The coffee is consumed. And then, 5 minutes later, the entire experience has been erased from memory as if it never happened. This is not enjoyment. This is not satisfaction. This is automation. This is the brain going through motions without any real conscious participation. Now contrast this with what happens when someone deliberately decides to reduce their coffee purchases. But instead of cutting coffee out entirely, they decide to invest more intention and attention into the coffee they do purchase. Once per week instead of 5 times per week, they visit a cafe they actually like, a place where the coffee is genuinely good, where the environment is pleasant, where the experience is something worth remembering. They sit down. They pay attention to the taste. They notice the warmth of the cup in their hands. They experience the moment with their full consciousness instead of consuming it while rushing between other activities. Suddenly, coffee is not something that costs $5 and disappears from memory. Coffee becomes something they genuinely enjoy and genuinely remember, something that brings real pleasure and satisfaction. The same pattern repeats across every category of microspending. Food delivery presents an interesting case study in this regard. Most people who regularly order food delivery are doing so during moments of stress, exhaustion, or emotional depletion, when their capacity for enjoyment and presence is lowest, when they are most likely to eat quickly and unconsciously without tasting or appreciating the food at all. They order the delivery. The food arrives. They eat it while working or scrolling or watching television or handling some other task that requires their attention. The food is consumed without being truly experienced. It is fuel that happened to be purchased through an app, not a meal that was anticipated or enjoyed or savored or remembered. Most of the time, they cannot even remember what they ordered within an hour of finishing. But when someone dramatically reduces their delivery orders and instead invests the time and energy into cooking 3 meals they actually anticipate, meals they prepare with intention, meals they eat with presence and attention, the entire experience transforms. They remember those meals. They taste them. They enjoy them. They have conscious memories of eating them. Over a week, they might have 1 delivery order instead of 7. But the quality and intensity of enjoyment has increased while the quantity and the cost have decreased. They are not deprived. They are liberated. They are experiencing food more fully by experiencing less of it. Alexis, 41 years old, works as an interior designer and initially resisted the idea of reducing her microspending because she was convinced it would mean a life of deprivation and constant self-denial. A future where she said no to every little pleasure and felt resentful about it. But when she actually sat down and examined what she was spending money on, she discovered something unexpected and transformative. She was eating food delivered by apps approximately 40 times per month. And when asked to describe what she actually tasted and enjoyed from even a single one of those deliveries, she found she could not do it with any specificity. The meals were not memorable. They were not particularly satisfying. They were just food that had arrived. She made a decision to cut her deliveries to 5 per month. And instead of using the remaining time or energy to do something else, she decided to spend that time actually learning to cook a few meals she genuinely wanted to learn. She picked 3 recipes. She shopped for ingredients intentionally. She prepared the meals from scratch. She ate them slowly and with attention. What shocked Alexis was not that she felt deprived by having fewer delivery meals. What shocked her was how much more she enjoyed eating when she was actually paying attention. She was spending $1,200 less per year on food, but she was experiencing food more intensely and more enjoyably than she had in years. She was not sacrificing pleasure. She was redirecting her money and attention toward things that actually produced pleasure, instead of just creating the illusion of pleasure. The irony was sharp and undeniable. She had been spending a lot of money on food delivery to make eating convenient. but the convenience had actually prevented her from truly enjoying food at all. The same principle applies to streaming subscriptions and other digital services. Most people have multiple subscriptions they barely use, subscriptions they pay for every month without really thinking about whether they are getting value from them. The question to ask is not whether cutting these subscriptions would mean a life without entertainment or without access to entertainment, because that is not what is happening. The question to ask is whether having 8 subscriptions is actually making someone happier than having 3 subscriptions they actually use. Research suggests it is not. In fact, having too many options often makes people less satisfied because the unlimited availability of content paradoxically makes it harder to choose, makes people less committed to finishing anything, makes the experience of consuming media less intentional and less enjoyable. When someone reduces their subscriptions from 8 to 3, they are not cutting themselves off from entertainment. They are making their entertainment consumption more intentional. Instead of having countless options that lead to mindless scrolling and switching from show to show without ever fully engaging with anything, they have 3 services they deliberately chose, and they watch the shows and movies they decide to commit to. The experience becomes richer precisely because it is more limited and more intentional. They are not deprived of content. They are freed from the paralysis of too much choice. The key insight that transforms someone's relationship with microspending is the recognition that most microspending is not actually producing pleasure or value in the conscious experience of the person doing the spending. Most microspending is producing a brief neural reward at the moment of purchase, a small dopamine hit followed by rapid habituation and then forgetting. The pleasure is not in the product or service. The pleasure is in the purchase itself, in the act of buying, in the brief moment of anticipation before the purchase becomes real. After that moment, the pleasure disappears. The product or service is often forgotten or underutilized or consumed without real attention or appreciation. When someone stops spending money on low-quality purchases made without intention, they are not sacrificing pleasure. They are sacrificing a particular type of false pleasure, the brief neural reward from purchasing, in order to make room for real pleasure, genuine satisfaction, authentic enjoyment that comes from intentional choices and conscious experience. If someone is going to spend money on coffee, the question is not whether to spend money on coffee. The question is whether to get value from that spending, whether to actually enjoy and remember the coffee, whether to make it an experience worth the price rather than just another transaction forgotten before it completes. The mathematics of this shift are worth understanding. Someone who spends $1,300 annually on coffee but remembers none of it and enjoys none of it is essentially burning money for nothing. Someone who spends $260 annually on coffee, 1 really good coffee per week instead of 5 forgettable ones, is getting dramatically more value from the money they are spending because at least they remember it and at least they enjoy it. The second person is not being deprived. They are being wise. They are redirecting money toward things that actually produce value instead of toward things that produce only the illusion of value. And this is where the real power of the decision emerges. Someone does not have to choose between wealth and pleasure, between financial responsibility and enjoyment. They can choose to eliminate the false version of pleasure, the brief neural reward from mindless purchases, and redirect that money and attention toward genuine pleasure, genuine satisfaction, genuine value. They can have fewer things and enjoy them more. They can spend less money and get more value. They can be happier and wealthier at the same time. The life someone builds by escaping the microspending trap is not a life of deprivation. It is a life of intention. It is a life where spending happens consciously rather than automatically. It is a life where purchases produce real satisfaction rather than fleeting distraction. It is a life where money is aligned with values and where every dollar produces genuine value rather than just producing the purchase itself and then disappearing. Your action for today. Choose one category of micro-spending you engage in regularly. Coffee, delivery food, subscriptions, or something else. For the next 7 days, do not make any purchases in this category. Instead, do one intentional alternative. If it is coffee, make one really good coffee at home and drink it with full attention. If it is food delivery, prepare one meal from scratch that you actually anticipate. If it is subscriptions, use only the 1 or 2 services you actually value. After 7 days, notice how you feel. Notice whether you feel deprived or whether you feel something completely different. Freedom, intention, presence. Chapter 6. How to escape the trap. Your practical system. Understanding. The trap is one thing. Understanding the psychology behind it is one thing. Seeing the numbers and recognizing how much money is disappearing into invisible spending is one thing. But understanding and recognizing, without having a concrete system for actually changing the behavior, is like recognizing the problem of a disease without having a treatment. The knowledge is incomplete. The person remains trapped because they understand what is happening, but not how to respond to what is happening. This chapter provides the actual mechanism, the step-by-step system that takes someone from awareness to action, from recognition of the problem to resolution of it, from understanding the trap to actually escaping the trap in a way that produces lasting change rather than temporary motivation that fades after a few weeks. The system outlined here is designed to be progressive, meaning it does not require someone to make massive changes all at once. It does not require the kind of extreme willpower and sacrifice that makes people fail and give up. Instead, it is designed to work week by week, with each week building on the previous week's progress, with small wins accumulating into significant results over time. This is crucial because research on behavior change shows that sustainable change happens through incremental progress rather than through dramatic all-or-nothing transformation attempts. The people who succeed in changing spending habits are the people who change gradually, not the people who try to change everything at once and then feel overwhelming resistance and failure. Week 1. The awareness phase. The first week is solely about awareness and observation. The goal is not to change anything yet. The goal is not to restrict purchases or to judge purchases or to feel guilty about purchases. The goal is purely to create visibility into what is actually happening with spending. During this first week, someone tracks every single purchase made under $20. They write it down or record it in a note on their phone or in an application designed for tracking. The goal is not to be perfect or comprehensive, but to capture enough data to see patterns. For each purchase, they note the item purchased, the price, the category, and ideally, a brief note about why they made the purchase. Was it stress, boredom, genuine need, impulse, convenience, or something else? At the end of the first week, they total up everything they spent on purchases under $20. This number, when revealed clearly and starkly, is often the moment when the problem becomes undeniable. They have concrete data showing exactly how much money left their account in the span of just 7 days. That number is multiplied by 52 to get an annual estimate, and then multiplied by 40 to get a lifetime estimate across their working years. Most people are shocked by these numbers. This is the point. This shock is the emotional fuel that makes weeks 2 through 4 actually possible. Week 2. The categorization phase. During the second week, the person takes the list of all their purchases from week 1 and categorizes them more carefully. They sort purchases into 4 categories. Forgotten items, things they completely forgot they bought. Convenience purchases, things bought for convenience despite having alternatives. Impulsive purchases, things bought without any forethought or genuine need. And intentional purchases, things deliberately chosen to fulfill a genuine need or desire. The point of this categorization is to see clearly which purchases actually produced value and which purchases were essentially spending money for spending's sake. At the end of this week, they calculate what percentage of their microspending falls into each category. They calculate what percentage of purchases were actually intentional versus how much was forgotten, convenient, or impulsive. For most people, the number is stark. Between 60 and 70% of microspending is not intentional. It is forgotten, convenient, or impulsive. This means that over half of their microspending is providing zero value. It is pure waste. This number, when fully understood, creates the motivation for the next phase of work. Week 3. The elimination phase. In Week 3, the person identifies the category of purchases they spend the most money on within the forgotten, convenient, or impulsive categories. And they make a commitment to completely eliminate that category for 7 days. If forgotten subscriptions make up the largest category of wasted spending, they cancel all forgotten subscriptions immediately. If delivery food in a particular app makes up the largest category, they simply do not use that app for an entire week. If coffee shop purchases make up the largest category, they do not visit any coffee shops for 7 days. The key to Week 3 is the focused elimination of one category, giving the person a concrete win, a tangible success that proves they can actually control their spending behavior. At the end of Week 3, they track how much money they saved by eliminating this category for just 7 days. They multiply this number by 4 to see how much they would save monthly. They multiply by 12 to see how much they would save annually. They multiply by 40 to see how much they would save across their working years. They multiply by 3.4 to see what that money would become if invested at 7% annual returns. They write these numbers down and really let them land. This is not theoretical. This is their actual money, their actual future wealth, sitting right there in those numbers. Week 4. The replacement habit phase. In Week 4, for the category they just eliminated, they establish a single replacement habit that addresses the same emotional or situational trigger, but does not involve spending money or involves spending money in a much more intentional way. If the category was coffee shop visits triggered by morning stress or need for a break during work, the replacement habit might be brewing a really good coffee at home in the morning and taking it slowly, or taking a 5-minute walk during work break time instead of a coffee run. If the category was delivery food triggered by dinner time stress or evening laziness, the replacement habit might be preparing a simple meal that takes 15 minutes and is still quick, but costs 1/10 of the delivery price. The goal of the replacement habit is not to create deprivation. The goal is to provide an alternative that addresses the same underlying need: the need for a break, stress relief, convenience, or pleasure, but in a way that does not trigger the spending reflex. For most people, this replacement habit becomes its own reward. The replacement habit often provides more genuine satisfaction than the impulsive purchase ever did. Someone who replaces coffee shop runs with home-brewed coffee they drink with presence and attention often finds they enjoy coffee more, not less. Someone who replaces delivery food with quick home meals often finds they enjoy eating more, not less. At the end of Week 4, they have successfully gone through the first complete cycle of the system. They have awareness. They have categorization. They have elimination and success. They have a replacement habit in place. Now they can repeat the same cycle with the second largest category of wasted spending, and then the third, and then the fourth, moving progressively through their spending patterns one category at a time. Moving forward beyond week 4. The system continues by repeating the same cycle for each subsequent category of wasted spending. Week 5 through week 8 focuses on the second category. Week 9 through 12 focuses on the third category, and so on. As each category is processed through this system, another category of wasted spending is eliminated and replaced with a more intentional alternative. The accumulation of these small changes across multiple categories produces dramatic results. Someone who eliminates forgotten subscriptions, reduces coffee shop visits, cuts delivery orders, and eliminates impulse purchases across all categories could save between $1,500 and $3,000 in the first year alone. But more importantly, they have not done this through suffering or deprivation. They have done this through awareness, categorization, small wins, and replacement habits. They have made the system part of their life rather than fighting against themselves to achieve the changes. A critical element of the system is the tracking of progress. At the end of each 4-week cycle, the person calculates exactly how much money they have saved from eliminating that category, extrapolates it to annual and lifetime numbers, including compound growth, and writes it down. This creates a powerful visual record of progress. As these numbers accumulate week by week, the person sees not just their spending decreasing, but their future wealth increasing. This is far more motivating than simply denying themselves purchases. They are not giving something up. They are building something. They are accumulating wealth week by week through intentional choices. Another critical element is flexibility and forgiveness. Someone using this system will sometimes fall back into old patterns. They will sometimes make impulsive purchases even after deciding to eliminate that category. This is not failure. This is just the reality of behavior change. The system accounts for this by focusing on overall trends and progress rather than on perfection. If someone eliminates delivery food orders for most of the week, but has 2 delivery meals instead of the 7 they would have normally had, they are still winning. They are still saving money. They are still making progress. The goal is not perfection. The goal is consistent progress toward a new pattern. Your action for today. Begin week 1 of the system right now. Pick up your phone or a piece of paper and commit to tracking every single purchase under $20 for the next 7 days. Do not worry about changing your behavior. Do not worry about restricting yourself. Just track. Just observe. Just create visibility. At the end of the 7 days, total it up. Multiply by 52. Multiply by 40. Write down the number. That number is the annual and lifetime cost of your current microspending pattern. That number is your starting point. Chapter 7. The Mathematics of Freedom. What this really means for your life numbers are abstract until they become personal. A number like $2 million is incomprehensibly large when stated abstractly. Someone cannot really grasp what $2 million means when they think about it theoretically. But when that number represents the actual difference between their current financial trajectory and their potential financial trajectory, when that number represents the specific future they are either building or destroying, with their daily choices about money, suddenly the number becomes concrete and real and impossible to ignore. This chapter makes the mathematics of microspending personal by translating the numbers into what they actually mean for someone's real life, for their actual future, for the specific opportunities and freedoms that money would create or prevent. The mathematics of compounding is perhaps the most powerful force in finance. And yet, it is one of the least understood and least intuited by most people. Compounding means that money grows not just on the original principle, but on the accumulated growth itself. It is the mathematical equivalent of a snowball rolling downhill and getting bigger and bigger as it accumulates more snow. The earlier someone starts investing money, the more time that money has to compound, and the more dramatic the final result becomes. This is why the difference between stopping microspending at age 25 versus at age 45 is genuinely staggering. Consider someone who stops their microspending today at age 35 and begins investing the money they would have otherwise wasted. Assume they save approximately $3,000 per year by eliminating their most wasteful spending categories. At a conservative 7% annual return, which is achievable through a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds and is well below historical market averages. That $3,000 compounds to approximately $115,000 by age 65. But that is just the 30 years from 35 to 65. If that same person had started at age 25, the same $3,000 per year would compound to approximately $265,000 by age 65. The 10-year difference from age 25 to age 35 results in $150,000 more wealth. That is approximately $150,000 in future freedom lost by waiting just one decade. Now expand this mathematics to include not just one category of microspending, but multiple categories. Assume someone eliminates all their most wasteful spending simultaneously and saves not $3,000 per year, but $7,912 per year. The total we calculated in Chapter 4 for someone eliminating coffee, delivery food, fast food, forgotten subscriptions, and other miscellaneous impulsive purchases. That's $7,912 per year, invested at 7% annual returns from age 35 to age 65. Compounds to approximately $264,000. From age 25 to age 65, that same annual savings compounds to approximately $615,000. Over 40 years, by investing money that would otherwise be spent on things the person does not even remember owning, someone accumulates over $600,000 in additional wealth. But the real power of these numbers only becomes apparent when someone translates them into what that money actually means in their life. $615,000 is not just an abstract number. It is freedom. It is the ability to leave a job that makes someone miserable because they have financial runway to take 3 months and find something better. It is the ability to take time off when someone needs it without falling into financial panic. It is the ability to handle unexpected emergencies without destroying themselves with debt. It is the ability to retire at 55 or 60 instead of 68. It is the ability to say no to things that feel wrong and yes to things that feel right without the calculation of immediate financial desperation overwhelming the decision. Nicole, 47 years old, made the decision to aggressively attack her microspending starting at age 43. She eliminated subscriptions, cut her coffee shop visits dramatically, reduced her food delivery orders, and cut back on impulse purchases across multiple categories. She saved approximately $6,000 per year from these changes. From age 43 to age 65, just 22 years. This money at 7% annual returns compounded to approximately $245,000. But more importantly, at age 65, Nicole had a choice. She could retire as planned, or because of the extra wealth she had built through eliminating microspending, she could retire at 62 instead, 3 years earlier than she had planned, with enough money to live comfortably for those extra 3 years. That decision to control her microspending gave her 3 extra years of freedom, 3 extra years of not working, 3 extra years of her life to spend however she chose. For someone who has been working since age 22 and is planning to retire at 65, that is 3 years out of 43 years of work, that they would not have had without the decision to control microspending. That is approximately 7% of their entire working life, given back to them simply by not spending money on things they were not consciously choosing to buy anyway. This is not a theoretical benefit. This is time from their actual life, returned to them, freed from the obligation of work. The mathematics also reveals something else that is often overlooked in financial discussions. The opportunity cost of microspending is not just the money itself, but what that money could have become. Every dollar spent on microspending today costs approximately $3.4 in future value after 40 years of 7% annual growth. So a $5 coffee purchase today actually costs someone $5 times 3.4 or $17 in future wealth. But more viscerally, it costs them time. Working to earn that money, working to earn money to replace it, working to earn money to invest, to replace the future value that was lost. The $5 coffee costs them not just $5 and not just $17 in future value, but also a fraction of the time they will spend working to earn enough to pay taxes on investments, to build the wealth they otherwise lost. Consider someone who earns $50,000 per year before taxes. To earn enough to buy a $5 coffee after taxes, they need to work approximately 15 minutes. But that 15 minutes of work, when compounded, represents approximately 51 minutes of work over the course of a 40-year career, when accounting for the opportunity cost of the lost investment growth. A $5 coffee is not a $5 expense. It is essentially 50 minutes of human life, 50 minutes of time spent working, the opportunity cost of that time and the growth that could have happened from investing that time's earnings. The deeper insight here is that controlling microspending is not actually about money. It is about time and freedom and autonomy. It is about building optionality in life. Every dollar someone does not waste on microspending is another dollar that gives them options. Options to work less. Options to take risks. Options to leave situations that are intolerable. Options to take time when they need it. Options to retire earlier or transition to different work or pursue something meaningful even if it pays less than what they currently do. This is the real mathematics of freedom. Not the abstract numbers, but the concrete choices those numbers represent. The person who eliminates microspending is not living a life of deprivation. They are building a life of possibility. They are making different choices about what matters and what does not matter. And those different choices compound over time into a fundamentally different life experience. A life with more freedom, more autonomy, more ability to choose what they do with their time and attention. The inverse is also true and worth considering carefully. Someone who does not control their microspending, who continues spending $7,912 per year on things they do not remember and do not value, is essentially trading their future time for purchases they will not recall. They are trading years of freedom for coffee they will not remember tasting, for food they will not remember eating, for subscriptions they will not remember having. They are trading not just money, but time and autonomy and optionality for the small dopamine hit of an impulse purchase. The power of this recognition is that it reframes the entire conversation about money and spending and financial responsibility. It is not about being cheap or restrictive or denying yourself pleasure. It is about recognizing that every dollar spent unconsciously is a dollar that could have been compounded into freedom and possibility and time back in your life. The choice is not between spending and not spending. The choice is between spending on things that matter to you with full conscious awareness and intention, or spending on things mindlessly that you will not even remember. Your action for today. Calculate your personal freedom number. Take the total you calculated for your annual microspending. Let us say it is $7,912. Multiply that by your years until retirement. Let us say 30 years. Multiply that total by 3.4 to account for compound growth at 7% annual returns. Write down that final number. That is the amount of future wealth you will not have if nothing changes. Now imagine what that number means in terms of years of work. Divide that number by your annual salary. That is years of work that the microspending is costing you. Write that down too. This is not theoretical. This is your actual time, your actual freedom, sitting right there in that calculation. Chapter 8. The Beginning. From this moment forward. This is not the end of the journey. This is the actual beginning. Everything that has been discussed in the previous chapters, the neurology of microspending, the psychology of cheap, the manufactured desires, the concrete numbers, the philosophy of intentionality, the practical system for change, the mathematics of freedom. All of it exists only to serve this single moment. The moment when someone decides that today is the day they actually begin, not tomorrow, not next week, not after they finish this audiobook and have time to think about it. Today. This moment. This is where the real transformation begins. The trap of knowledge is that it feels like accomplishment even when no actual change has occurred. Someone can listen to this entire audiobook, understand every point, intellectually accept that microspending is a problem, recognize that they are caught in the trap, and then continue making the exact same purchases, the exact same choices, the exact same patterns of behavior they had before. Knowledge without action is just another form of self-deception. The mind tricks itself into believing that understanding something is equivalent to doing something, that awareness is equivalent to change. But it is not. The person who understands the trap but continues living in it is still in the trap. Understanding is just the first step. Action is the only step that matters. The reason most people fail to change their spending patterns is not because they lack information about how to change. The reason is almost always because they wait for the perfect moment to begin, and the perfect moment never arrives. They think about starting next Monday. They think about waiting until their next paycheck. They think about giving themselves a few weeks to prepare mentally. They think about reading one more book or watching one more video or gathering just a little bit more information before they actually begin. And while they are waiting and thinking and preparing, days and weeks and months slip away, and the microspending continues, and the opportunity cost accumulates, and their future becomes a little bit smaller and a little bit less possible. The irony is that the actual beginning is far easier than most people anticipate. Starting is not about perfect preparation. Starting is not about having everything figured out. Starting is about one small action taken today that can be repeated tomorrow. It is about tracking one day of spending. It is about canceling one unnecessary subscription. It is about not visiting one coffee shop or choosing one replacement habit or making one intentional decision about money today. Consider what happens in the first week of actually applying the system from Chapter 6. Someone tracks their microspending for 7 days. They see the numbers clearly. They feel the shock and discomfort of that clarity. That discomfort is where change begins. That discomfort is not something to avoid or to hide from. That discomfort is the starting fuel for transformation. The brain cannot change what the brain is not willing to see. Once it sees, the resistance begins. And from that resistance emerges the possibility of genuine change. The second realization that makes people successful at actually implementing change is the recognition that they do not have to change everything at once. Someone does not have to eliminate all microspending immediately. They do not have to become someone who never spends impulsively, or who never takes the convenient option, or who never responds to a notification. They have to make one different choice. Just one. Instead of 5 coffee shop visits in a week, they have 1. Instead of 40 food deliveries in a month, they have 5. Instead of 8 subscriptions they never use, they cancel the 4 or 5 that are completely forgotten and keep the 2 or 3 that provide actual value. This is not about perfection. This is about movement in the right direction. Every single dollar not spent on microspending that is not being consciously chosen is a dollar moving toward freedom. The compounding effect is real and dramatic. But it starts with the first dollar, the first day, the first choice. Robert, 52 years old, spent 3 years listening to advice about controlling spending and understanding that he had a problem with microspending. But he did not actually change anything because he was waiting for the right moment, waiting for motivation, waiting for something external to force him to begin. Then his daughter asked him a simple question. "Dad, when are you going to actually do the things you say you want to do?" That question was the catalyst. He decided to begin immediately. He canceled 3 subscriptions that day. The next day, he tracked his spending. By the end of the first week, he had made the first small moves. By the end of the first month, he had implemented the first cycle of the system. By the end of the first year, he had saved approximately $8,000. By age 55, just 3 years later, he had accumulated enough savings to reduce his work hours from full-time to part-time. He was not wealthy. He was not financially independent. But he had dramatically more time and more freedom in his life than he had had before, simply because he finally actually began. The mental trap that prevents people from beginning is the belief that they need more information, more motivation, more preparation before they can start. But the opposite is true. The way someone gets more motivation is by starting and seeing the results. The way someone gains understanding is by beginning to apply the knowledge and learning from real experience rather than from pure information. The way someone prepares is by doing, not by thinking about doing. There is also a deeper psychological principle at play in why people delay beginning. Beginning represents a choice. It represents commitment. As long as someone has not actually begun, they can maintain the comfortable illusion that they could change at any time if they just decided to. But the moment they actually begin, even in a small way, they are admitting that they have not chosen to change until now, that they have been making conscious choices to continue the patterns they said they did not want to continue. That confrontation with personal responsibility and personal choice is uncomfortable. But that discomfort is where growth happens. That discomfort is the recognition that they have agency over their own life, that they are not a victim of circumstances, that they have the power to choose differently. The final piece that makes successful change possible is the recognition that change is not about becoming someone different. It is about becoming someone more intentional. It is about aligning daily decisions with values and with the life someone actually wants to build. The person who controls their microspending is not a different person. They are just the same person making more conscious choices about money and time and attention. They are directing their resources toward things that matter to them instead of toward things that are happening to them through manipulation and automation and the path of least resistance. And perhaps most importantly, the results begin almost immediately. Someone who implements the system from Chapter 6 will start seeing changes within the first week. They will see the numbers from their tracking and be shocked by their spending. They will cancel subscriptions and see money not leave their account anymore. They will start making different choices about coffee or food and notice immediately that they are saving money. These small, immediate results are powerful. They prove that change is actually possible. They build momentum. They create motivation for further change. The person who reads this audiobook and does nothing with it has not really read it at all. The person who reads it and understands it but does not implement it is still trapped. But the person who reads it and makes even one small change today is already beginning to escape. They are already beginning to reclaim their future, their time, their freedom. The person who tracks one day of spending or cancels one subscription or makes one different choice is already building a different trajectory. Your action for today, right now. Do not wait until you finish this audiobook. Do not wait until tomorrow. Do not wait until you have prepared perfectly. Open your phone right now and cancel one subscription you do not use. Or commit to tracking your spending for 7 days starting today. Or make one decision to replace one category of microspending with an intentional alternative. Choose one action. Do it now, not later, now. This is where the real transformation begins. Not in understanding, in action, in this moment, in your choice made today.